Here near Maine, an area that very few tourists ever come down to this area, but in this area is the headquarters of Culinary Union 226 in Nevada. And of all the unions in the state of Nevada, this is the one with the most checkered, some might say colorful, some might say violent, some might say bullying history of any of the unions. And today it has 60,000 people that are members. The members aren't bartenders. The members aren't people that are working in gaming, dealers, slot attendants. These are people that cook your food, clean your hotel rooms, by and large. And for them to reach that level of unionization throughout Las Vegas and the valley here, it did not come without, well, bloodshed, threats, mayhem, murder, hitmen, and at the very heart of it all was this union, Culinary Union 226, headquartered here in Las Vegas. It was founded in 1935, as so many unions were permitted when they passed the Wagner Act and the New Deal came in. The Roosevelt administration had a much more positive view of unions than the Coolidge administration and Harding and the administrations, the Republican administrations. And in the New Deal era, workers were desperate to not be overworked and underpaid, and unions gained a lot of traction in that period. This union was a very quiet union. Of course, Las Vegas was a very small town, and it wasn't until the 1970s that things really boomed, and that's when things with this union and some of its bosses, one boss in particular, took a very violent turn. Let's talk about some positive things that this union accomplished in its, what I would call its heyday, its maybe pre-violent or early pre-violent period through the early to mid-1970s. It staged various strikes. It actually succeeded in shutting down a lot of the hotels and casinos for sometimes days and days here as they negotiated with the casino owners over wages and benefits, and almost to an action. They won every single time. They would occasionally block the streets on Las Vegas Boulevard, and they were very great at, they were excellent at generating a lot of publicity. And when people found out about how hard these workers worked, and sometimes the conditions that they worked under and the demands that were put on them for working, the public sympathy was definitely with them. So it wasn't as difficult as maybe it might have been, with not a lot of violence, not a lot of terrible encounters, and clubs and cops and beatings and windshields being knocked out and scabs maybe being shot at and things like that. By and large, it was rather peaceful actions. And as you know, the way you hurt somebody really is hurt them in the pocketbook. And with the casinos being shut down for lack of staff, a few of them tried to make a go of it. They finally caved in and settled with the unions, and well, it's reached the point today. But there was a period in 1977 when they had a senior official who was the treasurer of 226, the local union here. Well, in 1958, there was a restaurant called the Alpine Inn on Paradise Road. We'll go down and look at where that used to be, across from the Hilton there. But the Alpine Hotel owner, they demanded that he unionize because he had a very popular restaurant there. There weren't a lot of restaurants. It was across the street of what we know as the Hilton and then the Westgate today. Well, the owner refused to cave in. And action began against that place for 20 years. There were on and off strikes and actions and protests outside of the Alpine restaurant. Well, in 1977, things took a really violent turn. Walking down Paradise here. And Paradise is one of those great north-south roads that allows you to bypass the Strip by going a little bit to the east of it. And it's a very long road. It'll take you down to the airport. It's also a road where the Westgate Hotel, what used to be called the Hilton, is located in. Behind, well, where I'm walking along on this side, we have now a residential condominium tower. I think the name of Spring Hill Suites here. And this is the exact site where the Alpine restaurant, the Alpine Inn, used to be. The Alpine Inn enjoyed a lot of success, main reason being that, look across the street here, we have the Las Vegas Hilton. It's now called the Westgate. At the time, I think it was the largest hotel in the world. Elvis Presley was appearing. It was gone big time, great guns. I think they set a record for how many times Elvis sold out the event center there. Well, imagine having a restaurant right across from the street from it here, where the Spring Hill Estates are now, and that's where Alpine Inn was situated. And they did great. It was a huge place. Lots of local people like to go there. Visitors like to go there because they had the Alpine, Tyrolean, Austrian, Bohemian theme going on. It was a lot of fun. They would have the Oompa bands, great bar, probably the girls with the low-cut tops and the big beer steins walking around. Well, just the kind of place I would have loved. To an older guy who was working at the complex where I'm staying right now here in Las Vegas, down on the south end. About 70 years old, and he remembers being younger and working and visiting the Alpine Inn. He was also a member of the culinary union at that time, and he remembers Al Bramley, big-time boss and treasurer, riding up and down picket lines in the 1970s, like 1976, and getting great glee out of seeing thousands of people holding up traffic on Las Vegas Boulevard. He would ride up and down in his silver Cadillac, smiling and just being very proud of what he had accomplished in bringing the casinos and the hotels to their knees. But there did remain that one major thorn in the side, you guessed it, the Alpine Inn. Now, Al Bramley might have been a lowlife, but he was not a murderer. But he knew he had to increase the pressure on the Alpine Inn if he was going to succeed in unionizing. This was a big place. This was a big operation, the Alpine Inn. And there were a couple other places around town that had failed to unionize. And, well, it made Al feel kind of like a chump when people would tell him, "Hey, Al, you've been going after the Alpine Inn for almost 30 years and they're still not unionized." Well, I guess one day Al had enough and he called a couple hitmen in to do a special job. In September of 1975, police were called to the scene of the Alpine Inn restaurant there because there was reports of a strange device in the parking lot. And when the police arrived there, they saw that a bomb had been placed behind the restaurant. And upon further investigation, they also determined that a smoke bomb had been set to go off where it would enter the air conditioning and heating ducts of the Alpine Village restaurant. I guess it was the hope of the person that arranged that it would smoke people out, damage the restaurant, and force it to close down. Of course, the restaurant owner may have early on suspected that Al Bramley did not really like the fact that he held out against the union, and, well, it might not have been a far stretch of the imagination for the owner to think exactly who to lay the blame on for that. But that was just the beginning of the problems that were to plague the Alpine Inn. December 20th, a mere 3 months later, December 20th of 1975, while the restaurant was full of over 200 diners and 75 people working there, a bomb tore a huge hole through the ceiling of the Alpine Inn. And within a short period of time, a secondary bomb went off. Well, you can imagine the mayhem of this double bombing at the Alpine. The big question remained, who was the one that was arranging for these bombs? Less than a month after the bombing of the Alpine Inn, the double bombing, there was another restaurant called David's Place. It was the site of another huge explosion. Police officers said that they could hear it blocks away, and it sounded like to them maybe a waitress dropped a whole pile of dishes or something. But now things were getting really serious with multiple bombings that occurred. And the one common theme that had united all of these bombings was the fact that both of these places, the Alpine Inn, David's Place, as well as another facility that long held out against unionization, had resisted efforts to unionize, and this drew a lot of suspicion. Plus, people were getting really scared about bombings. We think about going to Vegas today, and the last thing we expect is some mega bomb to be going off somewhere. But by the mid-1970s, 1977, 76, 77, people were worried. People were scared. People were starting to fear going out to restaurants and places with big venues of a lot of people. They never knew if they might be target of the big explosions that were going on. I might also mention that there were random traps set in parking lots of gas bombs. There were punctured gas tanks with fuses and detonation devices. This was really getting to be serious business, and people were starting to get injured. Unbelievably, in the bombing of the Alpine, the two bombs, no one was killed. By the middle of January, things were getting frantic, and the cops were really getting nowhere in their investigations. And things were to get worse. There was a place called the Village Pub, another place that resisted unionization efforts. The security guard, I think his name was Raymond Kraber, was doing his rounds outside of the restaurant, outside of the pub there, and he noticed a trail of gasoline coming from underneath of a Jeep. Well, he got down on the ground, and as far as he could determine, somebody had punctured a hole in the gas tank, and the gas was leaking on the ground. This was worrisome. And he did a smart thing. He called the fire department. The fire department came, and they realized this was no ordinary gasoline leak. They saw hoses coming down and connected to a gas tank above in the trunk. They opened up the trunk and they saw 350 gallons of gasoline in a container. Was ready to go off when that bomb went. The explosion would have been enormous. What police couldn't know at that time was there was a father and son team called Tom and Granby Hanley, who were experienced bombers. They had access to TNT and some of the mining companies around Nevada. They're ready source of explosive and things. Well, what police were to find out later upon investigation is that the father and son team had carried out some of the bombings. But Al Grambley was disappointed because some of the bombs had failed to detonate. And he made, this big union guy, made a big mistake that a lot of people make when they pay for services in the underworld, and you don't get what you pay for. You feel like you got ripped off. Well, Al decided to stiff them, the father-son combo, on the payments, and you guessed it. The Hanleys were pretty upset. Now, well, they were gonna fix Al's wagon, but they knew that Al carried a .357 Magnum around with him, so they had to be very careful how they were going to grab him. It turned out he stepped off a plane at the McCarran Airport. I believe it was later in 1977. The Hanleys were there to meet him. They threw him in a car, took him out to the desert where his body was found weeks later. No problem pinning it on the Bramley. They actually confessed to what they had. Done. The connection was found to Oasis Air Conditioning. Was the company that the payment was filtered through, as if it was paying for union air conditioning or whatever. And the whole connection was made, and well, that was the end of the story of the infamous bombing. I guess the moral of the story is, you better pay for what you ordered, and maybe if you're going to be the bombers, put it in writing that you're going to guarantee your work. Well, a lot of the pressure came off of the Alpine, but it was later to fold. As more development, the property went out to higher and better use. And that was the end of the story. Well, Culinary Union 226 continues today as a very strong and powerful union here in Las Vegas. It literally does possess the power to shut down the industry. The relations have been good for a lot of years. I'm going to close out here now with some of the actual pictures and the headlines of the paper, the Alpine. You'll get a real flavor for the period at that time. You know, real mob, real gang stuff here in Vegas, all part and parcel what makes this a really wild town with a very colorful history. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thumbs up are appreciated. And if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe